the thing that I think is the biggest barrier in our lives as disabled people is people's understanding and people's reaction to disability. And in saying that, the hardest thing is also the best thing. Because in terms of strangers' understanding, I wouldn't be able to travel independently if it wasn't for the kindness of strangers.
Hello and welcome back to the Accessible Future podcast. My name is Simon Jones. I'm very happy to have you. We got to sit down today with a lady by the name of Beth Deer. She works for AMI, which is Accessible Media Inc. She's also a disability advocate, and she shares life as a blind person so that people can understand what that's like. Her view of what an accessible future looks like revolves around the movie Zootopia, and once you hear it, you'll never view that movie the same again. I think you're really going to enjoy this interview, so let's get into it. Good morning, Beth. Thank you for joining our show. It's great to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat, and it's interesting what you guys are doing, and I'm really excited.
Very good. Well, before we get started, I got to ask you, you're not originally from Canada, so tell us a little bit about where you've come from.
Yeah, for sure. So I, just like you, by the sounds of it, I'm originally from the UK. I grew up in a very small town called Crowborough, which is in East Sussex. It's just south of London. And I lived in the UK until I was 18. And I went on a family holiday to Mexico, and me and my friend Sam and my sister were all dancing in the little nightclub. And some guy tried to dance with me, and I turned around and flipped him off because I was seeing someone at the time. And the next day, I was talking to a group of boys with my sister, and this guy starts talking to me, and I'm having a lovely conversation with him. And we all go to leave as a group, and my sister says to him, like, "Hey, do you mind if she holds your arm? She's blind." And he was like, "Oh." And then he's like, "I tried to dance with you last time." I was like, "Oh my God, that was you." I'm so sorry. And the rest is history. He came to England. I came to Canada. I think we saw each other 3 times, and then I moved here, and I've been here ever since.
What was life like transporting yourself maybe from England to Canada? Tell us about that.
I feel like my transition from England to Canada was quite mild in the sense that I didn't necessarily get the full impact of how different it is in terms of accessibility, especially when it comes to transport, because I was moving from a place that was very accessible where I could get a bus, I could jump on a train. Worst case, I had my parents or my sister to drive me, or friends. And then I moved here, and I just moved across the world for this guy. So if I needed to go somewhere, he was driving me. So I didn't necessarily feel the full impact of how inaccessible it is here in comparison to the UK. Probably not until I was like a few years into living here, which by that point I had my first guide dog. So I think even then the gap was kind of bridged by my guide dog.
Yeah. And so you've already mentioned that you're blind. Would you be free to share a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was born, my parents always knew there was something wrong with my eyes. I used to just sit and stare at my hand. It took me a really long time to smile and, do the typical things that babies would do. And they just knew something wasn't right. So they took me to the doctors. I ended up getting some brain scans. And at first they actually thought that I had a tumor. Turns out I didn't. I have something called optic nerve hypoplasia, which is where essentially you have half the pathways from the front of your eye to your brain. But as I grew up, I was always like a mystery because I could actually see, I could see relatively well. Like I could see to ride my bike, I could see to read large print, I could do all the things, and I didn't really miss out on much. And in my opinion, especially at that young age, if you'd have asked me like, "Oh, does your vision affect you?" I'd be like, "No, I just hate wearing glasses." But that was kind of it. Yeah, it was always a mystery. They didn't understand how I could see as well as I could with my diagnosis. And obviously with medical imaging now, like they can take pictures of these pathways, and mine are it's interesting. I actually went to an optician's a few years ago with my husband because I'm like, we need to take care of your eyes. And the optician was like, oh, like, you have a guide dog? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm blind. And he was like, what do you have? And I told him, and afterwards he's like, do you mind if I look at your eyes? I'm like, no, of course. And he's like, this is so interesting. And he showed my husband the difference between my optic nerve and his optic and my husband's optic nerve. And my optic nerve is like all grey and shriveled, and my husband's is like fat and pink and healthy. um, Growing up, they had no idea how I could see as well as I could. And then going into my teenage years, I was always at Great Ormond Street Hospital, which, Simon, I'm assuming you've probably heard of it
Yep.
before. It's the leading kids hospital in the UK. And I went for my annual checkup, and one of my doctors, or my only doctor that I had seen since I was 3 years old, was actually moving from the UK back to the States, and he invented Botox for behind your eye. So to correct a lazy eye or a squint, there's lots of different things you can do for it, surgery or now Botox, to help align the eye. He left, I got this new doctor, and the new doctor was like, is there anything that bothers you? And I was like, yes. At this point, I was like 13, 14. I was like, I hate my lazy eye. People make fun of me for it in school. And like, if I could change anything, like, I just want to have straight eyes. Like, is that too much to ask? And he was like, oh, I feel really confident doing that. But the doctor that had left had always said to my parents, if it's not broke, don't fix it. He was like, we never wanted to touch Beth's eyes because we just never understood them in the first place.
Yeah.
And yeah, I essentially had what is a very cosmetic surgery and should have had zero impacts on my vision whatsoever. And it did. It's had a huge impact on my vision. And I essentially now see, from my understanding, I now see exactly what I should have always seen, which is incredibly blurry. I am very fortunate that I do have some residual vision, and I do find even like, yeah, the residual vision I do find it helpful in certain settings. But it is considerably less than the vision I grew up with.
Is there certain times that you can actually see?
So there's never any times where I'm able to, see enough to read or see to a point where I can see any kind of detail. However, there is like the summer for me is the best. I love going to places like Palm Springs because everything is like so bright and colorful. And even though it's blurred, like I can make that out. I can make out the difference between the flowers that are lining the street and like the sidewalk itself. Whereas in the winter, if everything is covered in snow, which it is here, all I see is white. So it's kind of like the main color for the most part is what will take over in my vision, I guess. But definitely, I'm so relieved that we're coming into warmer months and I can get a bit more of my vision back.
Yeah. So what does an accessible future look like to you, Beth?
It's such a big question. And I think what's so interesting about it is that what an accessible future looks like to me is not the same as what it would look like to a wheelchair user or someone with a different disability. But yesterday, actually, I was watching Zootopia with my daughter. And in Zootopia, it is fully accessible. And I'm not sure if anyone's spoken to you about this yet. But
Not yet.
essentially, there is everything that every animal needs, there is. So if the animals are going on the train, there are huge doors for the giraffes and the hippos. And then there's tiny doors for the mice and the rabbits and the small animals. And I'm trying to think of another example. But essentially, everything that any animal needs is already built into this world that they all live in. Highly recommend watching. But that is what an accessible future would look like to me, where no one person, no one animal is left out. Everything is just there to make everyone's lives easier, definitely, I think one thing, especially for my community, a more accessible future, not a fully accessible future, but a more accessible future would be making sure that guide dog waiting lists condense way down, and making sure that businesses become far more understanding and more educated on how they can help blind customers. So often, like, I go into a store and I am trying to figure stuff out for myself, and there's never any help. Whereas, like, I remember, like, the huge difference between here and the UK. I remember, like, grocery shopping in the UK. You can call ahead, and someone will actually, like, meet you at the front door and help you
Wow.
do your grocery shopping. There's definitely not that here.
No.
So there's a million small changes that can be made that would make a huge difference.
So is there anywhere that you can't take your dog at the moment?
Technically, yes. Like, there are some rules, which I completely understand, like commercial kitchens, operating rooms, but nowhere that I would be going is somewhere where I wouldn't take my dog. I know that there are so many blind people that are very much like, they kind of switch between their dog and their cane. That's not me. I don't enjoy using a white cane. And even though a guide dog is like an ends to a means kind of thing, they are still incredibly helpful in ways I don't think a lot of people realize. A huge difference for me between my dog and my white cane. My dog will find me specific things. As an example, I can be like, find the bin, and he will take me to like a garbage bin. So if I've just been sat having a coffee and I need to throw out my cup, I don't have to hold on to my cup until I get home, which I probably would do if I was traveling with my white cane, because I wouldn't want to litter and I would just feel uncomfortable, and I wouldn't leave it because that's just rude. And there's things like, he can find the bathroom for me. Whereas if I was traveling with my white cane, if I needed to wee, I would hold on to my pee for hours until I got home, so that I didn't have to ask someone like, I'm blind, like, could you help me find the toilet, please? So guide dogs are incredibly good at multitasking and not just guiding.
So I wanted to ask you then, Beth, about your process of making content. So tell us a little bit about kind of what you do as a job currently.
So I do two things right now. Right now, I'm actually the busiest I've ever been in my life. I have both the kids at home. Neither of them are in daycare. My husband and I both work from home. For my, what I call my real job, my big girl job, I work for AMI TV, which is an accessible media company here in Canada. All the content that we produce, well, we actually don't produce that much content anymore, but all of the shows and series that we produce are based around the disability community. And there's some really, really good ones. And I was lucky enough when I first joined to be one of the hosts, one of the presenters for the TV channel, and I loved it. It's one of the best jobs I've ever had. It was so fun. However, we don't just have our TV channel. We also have an audio channel which reads newspapers, articles, stuff like that. But we are now transitioning to podcasting. So I am one of the featured reporters on one of our podcasts called Reflections. And it's a documentary style podcast where we share all kinds of stories from within and outside of the disability community. And then I also run my own social media, and basically just try and educate people on disability and blindness, guide dogs, without it feeling too uncomfortable or like you're consuming something that's boring. Because I think a lot of people hear disability and they're like, that doesn't affect me, I'm not watching that.
So has building that audience then on your social media content, has it really changed anything for you personally, maybe in the sense of community?
Yeah, I think so. And I think at first I started it with this mindset of like, I'm going to try and like make some money. I'm going to try and like get some brand deals. I'm going to try. And I don't know, like that was kind of like what I thought it was all about. I think at first it was like, this is the only reason why people do this, as much as I knew I also wanted to like educate people on stuff. Whereas now that's completely shifted. I'm not doing it for that reason at all anymore. I am doing it for one, my community, but also I've had so many messages from mums of children who are blind, are low vision, and mums who are just worried and scared that their kids aren't going to have a normal life. And, they're scared that they're not doing the right things and all of that. And the messages that I have received from parents has made the hours, weeks, months that I've put into my social media so worth it. I've also received messages from like teenagers who are blind and low vision being like, I've just like never seen myself be represented, and I love your guide dog, but also thank you for posting these things. Like, they're so important, and I think that people enjoy learning them from someone that is living it rather than someone who is just teaching it.
So when people picture blindness, what do they get wrong? Like, what perceptions?
There's so many. But I think the biggest one, and I say this to everyone, is blindness is a spectrum, ignorance isn't. And when I say blindness is a spectrum, I literally mean that like there are legally blind people that can still read. Legal blindness is, I can't remember the exact definition of it, but it's so vast. Like, some legally blind people can still read. I think it's anything over size 18 font, but they could be completely night blind. So like it's so complex. Like, what I always tell people is a story from when I first lost my sight. I ended up going to a school for the blind in the UK called New College, Worcester. And at the time, I actually thought I was being tortured. Now I realize that was actually one of the best things I could have ever done for myself, because I learned absolutely nothing from the teachers, but what I learned from the students, like, honestly saved my life. It really did. And I remember when I went on my assessment to see if it was going to be the place for me, I was being guided around what's called sighted guide, which is normally where a sighted person, you hold onto their arm and they guide you. I thought I was being sighted guided around the school. And then I got shown the dorms and met a lot of the other students. And the girl who was guiding me was actually a student. And I remember saying to her, like, you must have so much vision. Like, the way you move around is just so seamless. And she's like, no, like, you'll get used to it. Like, you'll find a way of moving around, and you just have to learn not to care. And I was like, but like, how much vision do you have? And she had 2 fake eyes. She had no vision whatsoever. And there was a rule at the school that no one was allowed to use canes. Otherwise, you just like walk around tripping each other up because no one could see. So, yeah, she was incredible. And that really put things into perspective for me. It was like, hey, like, I can still see light. I can still even see color in some circumstances. Like, in comparison to her, like, I can still see. Like, I'm going to be just fine.
First of all, thank you for sharing that, Beth. Now, I got to ask you about your guide dog. So,
Of course.
is this your first or second guide dog?
Churro is my second dog.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your first guide dog, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. My first guide dog was amazing. They're all bred to be guide dogs, but he was a big black Labrador. He was called Patronus. So Harry Potter fans loved that because, just in case you don't know, a Patronus in Harry Potter is the spirit animal that comes to protect the witches and wizards. And Harry's Patronus is a stag. And my last name is Deer. And Patronus also means protector in Latin, which he was, and he was amazing. So I received him when I was 19. I had been on the waiting list in the UK since I think I was 16 when I joined. But when I moved to Canada, I obviously had to give up my spot on the wait list, which I found very difficult and sad. And then I moved here and I I don't think that everything happens for a reason, but I do think that this did. When you get a guide dog, they are matched on so many things: preferences, walking speeds, your lifestyle, how versatile you need the dog to be. Like, are you someone that just needs a guide dog to help get you out the house and get you to your mailbox every day? Or are you someone that plans to travel the world with your dog? So there's so many things to consider, and I had kind of no idea really what I wanted to do or was going to be doing at that time, because when I got on the waiting list for guide dogs for the blind in the States, I didn't have a job here yet. Was I was 19. I didn't know what I was doing with my life. And I said to them, I was like, I know I'm going to be going back to England. Like, I need a dog that's happy to travel and do all the things. And he was so robust. Like, he loved to work. And whenever they would come and do their yearly check-in, they would always watch him and be like, he is one of our guide dogs that was meant to be a guide dog. And they're normally ready once they pass their formal training. They're normally ready between like earliest like 18 months, even that's very young, to about 2 years. And Patronus was ready at 18 months. Like, he had passed everything. He was just so driven. Like, he just genuinely loved to work. Like, his favorite thing would be a crowded place. Like, this dog loved to cut people off and just weave his way through. He was amazing, but he was a guide dog. Like, he was not good at being a regular dog. He didn't want to play. You threw something for him, he'd be like, that was so dumb, you have to go and get that. Like, he didn't want to play ever. He just wanted to cuddle and just be loved. He was a different cat. He was not a regular dog.
So it sounds like it was extremely difficult then for you to lose him.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It was. It's funny because I think that I had pictured in my mind very much how I saw or like foresaw getting an ex guide dog, like what that would look like. After speaking to so many other guide dog users, it was like, okay, so this is how it goes. You decide your dog maybe slows down, or they decide that they don't want to work anymore. Some guide dogs literally will just stop. They'll just like stop guiding you, and sometimes you can work through it. Other times it's like, no, they're done. They don't want to work anymore. And I guess I never had thought about any other possibilities of what would retire a guide dog, especially my guide dog. I never saw anything going wrong with him. And I think because he wasn't a dog, I think I always kind of assumed that nothing would ever happen to him that would happen to a normal dog. But unfortunately, we were actually at an Oiler game and I noticed he was panting, and I was like, that's really weird because we're in a cool environment. He's not actively like moving that much. So I decided the next day, I called guide dogs. I was like, hey, I was literally in like an ice rink last night and he was panting, and today he like has coughed a few times and just doesn't sound right, and they're like, it sounds like he has kennel cough. Take him to the vets and see what they can do for him. So took him to the vets, and the vet's like, oh, like, we love him here. Like, you guys go run some errands. Like, you can come back and get him in a bit. So my husband and I went and did a few things, and then I get a call from the vet, and she's like, hey, how far away are you? I'm like, oh, like 10 minutes. She's like, can you come back now? I'm like, okay. Go in, and they like take us to the back, and they're like, so you guys need to take him to the emergency vets. Like, we've already called them. They're ready for you. He has something very wrong in his chest because of how big he was. Like, he wasn't a huge dog, but for a lab, he was quite big. She was like, there's something in his chest. I don't know what it is, but like, I can see fluid, and I can actually see like some kind of object. So we took him to the emergency vets. I was just so unprepared. I was on the phone with guide dogs, just bawling my eyes out. Like, what am I going to do? They're like, okay, like, let's just see what they say when you get to the emergency vets. They had me sign like a DNR kind of thing. Like, if I wanted him to be resuscitated or not, which obviously I did, if something was to happen. That was just the beginning of the end for this poor dog. He went in to have surgery the next day. He had something called a twisted lung lobe, which is incredibly rare. I got him from Guide Dogs for the Blind, and they're an organization that's been around nearly 85 years. They have extensive medical history and records on all of their dogs. They have never seen this before in any of their dogs. So he had this twisted lung lobe. He had that part of his lung removed, and then he developed something called a chylothorax, which they don't know if it was because of the twisted lung lobe or the twisted lung lobe was before or because of the chylothorax. It's like a chicken and the egg situation. But this is essentially where fluid gathers around the chest. So they started to try and treat this. He had a second surgery. They like inserted some dye in him to try and see where like the leaks were coming from to try and stop the fluid from coming up and accumulating. And it didn't work. The surgeon said it was like one of the longest procedures he's ever done. And he was like, the surgeon himself was like gutted. He was like, I'm so sorry. Like I made the executive decision while I was in there to insert a port so that we can continue to drain his chest if I have been completely unsuccessful, which he was, unfortunately. So for the last 18 months of his life, poor Patronus had fluid drained from his chest pretty regularly. At first, it wasn't too much. At first, it was like 300 mils every 3 months. But at the end, it was 3 liters every 48 hours. So it was pretty gnarly. He had vets like all over North America just rooting for him. They all tried so hard, and I have never seen so many cards with so much writing in, not that I could see it, but you know what I mean, for a dog. Like when it came time to say goodbye to him, all the vets here in our little town had actually learned how to drain his chest so that we didn't have to keep driving to Edmonton to have it done. And he said to us, he was like, I'm so sorry. I normally have vet techs in here to help, but we have all become so attached to him that no one else can be in here. And he's like, I'll try my best to not cry. He's like, I've put down my own dogs and not cried, but this dog is just so special. So he was an incredible dog, an awful, awful, awful end to his life. Not what any of us were expecting for him, but that's part of having the independence and the freedom. Is at some point that's not going to be there anymore unless you're lucky enough to transition just from one dog to the next. So when Patronus did get sick, I made the decision to put myself straight back on the waiting list just in case. And I am glad that I did do that. Because now I have Churro.
Yeah, and so Churro is your second.
Churro is my second dog. Yeah. And it's funny because when I went on the waiting list, I was like, I have zero preferences. Like, I just need a guide dog. And then after Patronus died, I was like, do not give me a black lab. I cannot have a black lab. There isn't, like, please don't give me a black lab. I can't do it. And I was like, and preferably a dog that is completely different temperament and just nothing like Patronus. Not that Patronus wasn't amazing, but like he was so amazing that I didn't want another dog to remind me too much of him, because I think I would have found that really, really hard. And that's exactly what I got. I got a dog that is absolutely nothing like Patronus.
Well, what an incredible story. I think a lot of us take it for granted, but you as a person are really dependent on these guide dogs to get through in life. And I'd go as far as saying it's almost like another child.
Yeah. I mean, now that I have kids, guide dogs are way more helpful than the kids. But I love my kids. But my dogs definitely kind of just have like their own league.
Yeah.
However, I don't think that some people realize how big and how important a guide dog's role is. Like, when I leave my house, I am trusting him with my life. And I have met some terribly trained guide dogs, because part of our job as guide dog handlers is to keep up with everything that they learn when they were in training. Like training almost never stops. You have to stay on top of all of the things and behaviors that they learn when they were going through their formal training. If you let them get away with something once, you better believe they're going to continue to do that until you correct them.
So what do people not understand about a guide dog?
I think there's a lot that's kind of like misunderstood about a guide dog. I think one of the ones I always get is like people are always like, oh, like I have people comment on my videos all the bloody time being like, he's a slave, like you work him into the ground. Which just isn't the case. Like, he comes home and he is a regular dog. Yes, there are still rules. No, you can't be jumping on the couch and you can't be taking food out of the kids' hands, and you have to still be well behaved. But once you're at home, you can do whatever you want. You want to go play, you go play. If you want to have a nap, you have a nap. Like, he is just a regular dog. I think in terms of their working, I think people can never understand why it's important to not distract a guide dog. As an example, if we are walking and you walk past us and you are like, oh, hi puppy, hi, and he does manage to break focus, and then there's an obstacle and he forgets to guide me around it because he's like, oh, that person was so nice, that can be really dangerous. And I think that to keep that like understanding that when your harness is on, like you're in business mode, when it's off, you can just be a dog.
So one other question leading on from that I was going to ask is then, so what does that say about how society views disability?
Ooh, that's maybe too much of an intellectual question for Beth's little brain. No. I think the way society views disability is difficult. I think that when you talk about society as like just such a general kind of like sweeping thing, society views disability as like a really wrong kind of like, there is something very wrong with you and you can't live a normal life and you can't have all these amazing things. I think it takes for people to know people with disabilities to realize that like society's kind of generalized view of disability is wrong. The difference for me when I'm traveling with a white cane versus a guide dog is very noticeable. When I'm traveling with a white cane, like no one's going to offer me help. No one's going to just be like, oh, hi, you have a cane. No one's just going to start up just a regular conversation with me. In fact, I would say people will stare and avoid me if it's up to them, which obviously it is. Whereas when I travel with a guide dog, help is just thrown at me. I'm kidding, but it's a lot more. People are a lot more interested, and I all of a sudden am so much more approachable. People are genuinely interested about the dog, but because they're interested about the dog, it can open up such like a wider conversation. As an example, if I'm traveling by myself and I start talking to someone about Churro, and I just so happen to drop in there that we're flying to Toronto, we like go there a few times a year for work, and like, oh, what do you do for work? Oh, I'm a TV presenter, or like I'm not doing that currently, but oh, like you're a TV presenter, and it's like, oh yeah, no, like I know I'm blind. That seems weird to you, but like, yeah, no, we're still very capable of doing pretty much every job except from being a bus driver.
So what's it like parenting children when you're blind?
You know what? I thought it was going to be like really difficult, and there are hard parts to it. My personal struggles are more like if I need to like get them to school or like that kind of thing. I obviously can't drive them, and if it's winter, I can't walk them there. But I would honestly say it's actually not that different from just regular parenting. Like all parents have struggles and frustrations and things that they wish were different. And, all the things that I have struggled with as a parent or as a blind parent are all things that I think I probably would have struggled with even if I could see, honestly.
So what do you want your daughters to understand about disability as they grow up?
I want my children to understand that disability doesn't mean inability. And I think that that is a lot of the time what people assume it means. But I never want them to think that someone's accessibility is negotiable. I never want them to think that someone should be excluded because they won't be able to do that because of their disability. That's not up to, that would never be up to them to decide. I want them to be incredibly inclusive. I don't ever want them to think that they are better than someone with a disability just because they are able bodies. Like I want them to not see disability as something that is wrong.
Yeah. It's the same with when we bring up our children. Going right back to what you said, you don't want them to view other people worse off than them.
Absolutely, yeah.
I know we're just about out of time, but how can people find out about you and on your social media?
So I am trying my best to go across all platforms, but currently my most active platform is Instagram, and my handle is at @the_blind_girly, and that is GIRLIE. And yeah, that's the best way to find me.
One last question for you then, Beth. So what's the one thing that you wish every listener understood about being blind in a world that's not designed for you?
If there was one thing I would want people to know about being blind, it is that blindness is a spectrum. But I also just kind of want to add that, like, the thing that I think is the biggest barrier in our lives as disabled people is people's understanding and people's reaction to disability. But in saying that, the hardest thing is also the best thing, because in terms of strangers understanding, I wouldn't be able to travel independently if it wasn't for the kindness of strangers and the kindness of people around me. And I think that there's kind of like it's just a very fine line. I wish people knew more, just in general about disability, but I am also just always kind of blown away at how helpful and kind people are.
So that does actually wrap up our podcast today. So we do want to thank you very much for coming on, Beth, today and sharing your insights and sharing your amazing story. So we thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I love the idea of this podcast, and I hope that you get lots of more really great guests and continue to educate people.
Yes, that's what this is all about. So thank you very much.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Wow, that was a really great interview. I keep thinking back to Beth's thoughts as she closed up on the barriers that she faces. The biggest barrier is people's understanding, but at the end of the day, people's kindness always shines through, even if they don't understand. That is such a great takeaway. On this podcast, we talk a lot about education, but there's nothing more valuable than being kind, whether you understand their challenges or not. Everything that Beth mentioned, her Instagram, TikTok, her AMI reflections are all linked in the notes below. On social media, she is at @the_blind_girly, which is spelt GIRLIE. If you're enjoying the Accessible Future podcast, please subscribe and leave us a rating wherever you're listening from. It really helps other people find the show. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We'll see you on the next one.